The sweltering July sun bore down mercilessly on Olivia Greenwood as she stared at her own reflection in the ornate mirror. Her wedding dress suddenly feeling like a prison rather than the symbol of joy it was meant to be. Her hands trembled as she adjusted the pearl-studded veil one last time, remembering the look in Harold Whitaker's eyes the previous night when the wedding gift from her uncle had arrived late, a darkness that had turned her blood to ice. Olivia's breath caught in her throat as she recalled the way Harold's handsome face had contorted with rage, how he had hurled a crystal glass against the wall of his study, shattering it mere inches from where she stood. "Is that what awaits me?" She whispered to her reflection, a single tear tracking down her carefully powdered cheek. A lifetime of walking on eggshells. It was 1873 in Linden, Wyoming Territory, and at 22 years old, Olivia was about to marry into one of the wealthiest families in the region. The Whitakers owned the largest cattle ranch for 50 miles, and her father, deep in debt after a series of poor investments, had practically pushed her into Harold's arms. The match had seemed sensible at first. Harold was handsome, educated back east, and attentive during their courtship. But as the wedding drew closer, she began to glimpse flashes of something frightening beneath his polished exterior. A soft knock at the door pulled Olivia from her thoughts. Her mother entered, already dabbing at her eyes with a lace handkerchief. "Oh, my darling, you look absolutely radiant," Mrs. Greenwood said, clasping her hands together. "Everyone is seated. Your father is waiting to walk you down the aisle." Olivia nodded, unable to form words past the lump in her throat. As her mother fussed with the train of her dress, Olivia's gaze drifted toward the open window. The church was only a short distance away, and she could hear the faint strains of the organ music beginning to play. "Mother," she finally managed, "did you ever have doubts about marrying father?" Her mother's hands stilled. "Every bride has nerves, dear. It's perfectly normal." "This isn't nerves," Olivia insisted, turning to face her mother directly. "I'm afraid of him." Mrs. Greenwood's expression hardened. "Nonsense. Harold Whitaker is the finest catch in the territory. Your father has staked everything on this match. Everything." She lowered her voice. "The farm, our home, all of it depends on this marriage going forward." The weight of expectation pressed down on Olivia's shoulders like a physical burden. She nodded mutely and allowed her mother to lead her out of the room. Her father waited at the bottom of the stairs, resplendent in his Sunday best. His smile didn't quite reach his eyes as he took her arm. "You'll make us proud today, Livy," he murmured. The short walk to the church felt like the longest journey of her life. Every step brought her closer to a future she increasingly dreaded. The church doors loomed before her, and as they swung open to reveal the packed pews and Harold waiting at the altar, Olivia felt her heart hammering against her ribs. The music swelled as she began her slow procession down the aisle, clutching her father's arm for support. The faces of the townsfolk blurred together, their expressions of joy and approval like smears of color in her peripheral vision. All she could focus on was Harold's face, handsome, yes, but with a tightness around his mouth that made her stomach clench. As she drew closer, she saw it, that flash of something dark in his eyes as they drifted to the flower arrangement at the altar. Something wasn't to his liking. His jaw tightened, and though he smiled as she approached, Olivia saw his hand clench into a fist at his side, knuckles white with restrained anger. In that moment, with perfect clarity, she knew she couldn't do it. She couldn't bind herself to a man whose rage simmered so close to the surface, ready to erupt at the slightest provocation. What would happen when they were alone, when there was no one to witness his temper? Her steps faltered. Her father tugged gently at her arm, urging her forward, but Olivia remained rooted to the spot halfway down the aisle. "Livy," her father hissed under his breath. "Move along now." The congregation began to murmur. Harold's expression darkened further, that dangerous light in his eyes growing stronger as he realized something was wrong. "I can't," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the organ music. "I can't marry him." Before her father could respond, Olivia dropped her bouquet, gathered her skirts in her hands, and bolted toward the side door of the church. The collective gasp of the congregation followed her as she burst into the bright Wyoming sunlight, her heart pounding in her ears. She ran blindly, heedless of the damage to her satin slippers or the fact that her veil had come loose and was now streaming behind her like a banner. All she knew was that she had to get away, far away from Harold Whitaker and his barely contained fury. Behind her, she could hear the commotion from the church, voices raised in confusion and alarm. Soon they would come looking for her. Harold would not take this humiliation lightly. Her father would be furious. The entire town would be scandalized. Olivia ducked into an alley between the general store and the blacksmith shop, trying to catch her breath and think. She needed to get out of Linden, but how? She had no money of her own, no horse, and in her wedding finery, she would be immediately recognizable to anyone in town. As she pressed herself against the rough wooden wall of the building, she heard the sound of approaching footsteps and voices. She couldn't have gone far, came Harold's voice, tight with controlled anger. Find her, now. Panic surged through Olivia's veins. She looked around desperately for somewhere to hide, but the alley offered little cover. Just as she was about to make a run for it, a strong hand closed around her wrist, pulling her through a door she hadn't noticed. She opened her mouth to scream, but another hand clamped gently over her lips. "Quiet," a low voice commanded in her ear. "Unless you want them to find you." Olivia found herself in the dimly lit back room of the blacksmith shop, face to face with Samuel Morgan, the young blacksmith who had taken over the business after old Mr. Jenkins had passed away the previous year. She had only spoken to him a handful of times when her father's wagon needed repairs, or when Harold had commissioned some decorative ironwork for his ranch house. Samuel was tall, with broad shoulders developed from years of working the forge. His dark hair was tied back from his face, revealing strong features softened by kind blue eyes that now regarded her with a mixture of concern and amusement. "Miss Greenwood," he said, removing his hand from her mouth once he was sure she wouldn't cry out. "Or should I say, almost Mrs. Whitaker. Seems like you've had a change of heart." Olivia's cheeks burned with embarrassment, but there was no judgment in his tone. I couldn't go through with it," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Samuel nodded, moving to peek through the crack in the door. Outside, Harold's men were still searching, their voices growing more frustrated. "Can't say I blame you," he murmured. "Whitaker's not known for his gentle temperament among the working men of this town." Relief flooded through Olivia at his understanding. "I need to leave Linden," she said urgently. "He'll never forgive this humiliation. My parents." She faltered, thinking of the disappointment and anger she would face, of her father's financial ruin that would now be inevitable. Samuel studied her for a long moment, then seemed to come to a decision. "Wait here," he instructed, moving to the back of the shop. He returned moments later with a bundle of clothing. "Put these on, you can change behind that screen." "They're my sister's things. She left them here last time she visited from Cheyenne." Olivia took the simple dress, trousers, and shirt with trembling hands. "Why are you helping me?" A shadow crossed Samuel's face. "Let's just say I've seen what happens when a woman ties herself to a man with a temper like Whitaker's. My mother." He shook his head. "Never mind that now. Change quickly, I'll keep watch." Behind the screen, Olivia stripped off her wedding gown as swiftly as possible, her fingers fumbling with the long row of buttons. The plain calico dress and sturdy boots felt strange after the finery she was accustomed to, but she was grateful for their practicality. When she emerged, Samuel was waiting with a hat and a pair of scissors. "Your hair," he explained apologetically. "It's too recognizable." Olivia's hand flew instinctively to her long golden curls, painstakingly arranged for the wedding. Then she thought of Harold's face, contorted with rage, and extended her hand for the scissors. "Do it," she said firmly. Samuel hesitated. "Are you sure?" "More sure than I was about marrying Harold Whitaker." With a nod, he guided her to a stool and began to cut, working quickly but carefully. Olivia watched as lock after lock of her hair fell to the floor, feeling lighter with each snip of the scissors. When he finished, she ran a hand through the short crop that barely reached her chin. "It'll grow back," Samuel said, sounding apologetic. "It's perfect." Olivia replied, surprised to find she meant it. There was something freeing about shedding this visible symbol of her old life. Samuel handed her a small mirror, and Olivia barely recognized the person staring back at her, a young woman with wide, determined eyes and a boyish haircut, dressed in simple clothing that bore no resemblance to the society lady she had been just hours before. "Now what?" she asked, setting the mirror aside. Samuel moved to the window, peering out cautiously. "Whitaker's men are covering the main streets. They'll be checking the stage depot and livery stable too." He turned back to her. "I have a horse not much to look at, but strong and steady. I can get you out of town using the back trails." "And then what?" Olivia asked, reality crashing down on her. "I have nowhere to go, no money. I have a cabin," Samuel interrupted, "up in the foothills, about a day's ride from here. My pa built it years ago for hunting. No one knows about it except me and my sister. You can stay there until things cool down." Olivia stared at him, overwhelmed by his kindness. "Why would you risk so much for me? Harold Whitaker is a powerful man in these parts." Samuel's expression hardened. "Whitaker may own half the cattle in the county, but that doesn't give him the right to own a woman's soul. Besides," he added with a slight smile, "I've never much cared for bullies, no matter how rich they are." A commotion outside drew their attention. Through the window, Olivia could see Harold himself now, his face like a thundercloud as he barked orders at his men. The sight of him sent a chill down her spine. "We need to move now," Samuel said, gathering up her discarded wedding dress. "I'll hide this, then meet you at the back door in 2 minutes. There's a small gap in the fence behind the shop that leads to where I keep my horse." Olivia nodded, suddenly afraid again. "What if they catch us?" Samuel's eyes met hers, steady and reassuring. "They won't." True to his word, Samuel returned quickly, now wearing a battered hat and duster that would help disguise him as well. He led her through the back door, both of them crouching low as they made their way to the fence. The gap was barely wide enough for them to squeeze through, but they managed, finding themselves in a small paddock where a rangy bay gelding stood dozing in the afternoon sun. "This is Rusty," Samuel said, approaching the horse and patting its neck. "Not much to look at, but he's got heart." Olivia watched as he quickly saddled the horse, his movements efficient and practiced. She jumped when a shout came from nearby. Harold's men were moving closer to their hiding place. "Time to go," Samuel murmured, checking the cinch one last time before mounting up and extending his hand to her. Olivia took it without hesitation, allowing him to pull her up behind him. "Hold on tight," he instructed, and Olivia wrapped her arms around his waist as he urged the horse forward at a walk, keeping to the shadows between buildings. They skirted the edge of town, avoiding the main streets where searchers were still combing for the runaway bride. Olivia's heart was in her throat the entire time, expecting at any moment to hear Harold's voice calling out, to feel rough hands dragging her from the saddle. But Samuel navigated them skillfully through back alleys and service paths until they reached the outskirts of Linden. Once clear of the last buildings, Samuel spurred Rusty into a canter, heading not for the main road but toward a line of trees that marked the beginning of the foothills. Olivia clung to him, the reality of what she'd done finally beginning to sink in. She had abandoned her wedding, humiliated her family, and was now fleeing town with a man she barely knew. Yet underneath the fear and uncertainty, there was an undeniable sense of liberation. They rode hard for several hours, stopping only to rest the horse and drink from Samuel's canteen. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the landscape, Olivia found herself studying the man who had come to her rescue. There was a quiet strength about Samuel Morgan that she found reassuring, so different from Harold's volatile temperament. "We'll make camp here for the night," Samuel announced, reining Rusty to a stop in a small clearing sheltered by pine trees. "We're far enough from Linden now, and it'll be safer to navigate the mountain trails in daylight." Olivia dismounted awkwardly, her legs stiff from the unaccustomed hours in the saddle. As Samuel tended to Rusty, unsaddling him and rubbing him down, she looked around at what would be their campsite for the night. The realization that she was truly alone with this man miles from civilization should have frightened her, but strangely, it didn't. "You've done this before, haven't you?" she asked, watching as he efficiently gathered wood for a small fire. "Helping people escape, I mean." Samuel paused, a handful of kindling in his grasp. "Not exactly," he admitted, "but I've helped a few folks who needed to disappear for a while. This territory's full of people running from something." He glanced up at her with a hint of a smile. "Though I've never helped a runaway bride before, that's a first." The way he said it, without judgment or mockery, eased some of the shame Olivia had been carrying. She sat down on a fallen log, watching as he coaxed a small flame to life. "I should feel terrible," she said softly, "for what I've done to my parents, for the scandal I've caused, but all I feel is—" She searched for the right word. "Relief," Samuel suggested. "Yes," Olivia nodded. "Relief." "Is that awful of me?" Samuel sat back on his heels, the fire now crackling steadily. "I don't think so. From what I've seen and heard of Harold Whitaker, you had good reason to run." His expression grew serious. "I've seen him lose his temper with his ranch hands, saw him break a man's jaw once for letting a calf get away during branding. A man like that doesn't change just because he's put a ring on your finger. If anything, he gets worse," Olivia finished quietly. "I know. I saw glimpses of it during our engagement. Little things at first, shouting at servants, throwing things when he was frustrated. But last night," she shuddered at the memory. "He was so angry about a delayed wedding gift that he smashed a crystal glass against the wall. If I hadn't stepped back in time—" Samuel's jaw tightened. "Then you made the right choice today." They fell silent as he pulled provisions from his saddlebag: jerky, hard biscuits, and a small tin of coffee. It was a far cry from the lavish wedding feast that would have been served at the Whitaker ranch, but Olivia found herself ravenous nonetheless. As they ate, Samuel told her about his plans for them. "The cabin's well stocked with basic supplies. My sister and I were up there about a month ago. It's isolated, no neighbors for miles. You'll be safe there while we figure out what to do next." Olivia questioned, surprised by his continued involvement in her plight. Samuel met her gaze steadily. "I'm not about to leave you alone in the wilderness, Miss Greenwood. Not with Whitaker likely to have men searching every town and settlement within 100 miles. Please call me Olivia," she said. "After today, I think we've moved beyond formalities." He nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Olivia, then." "And I'm Samuel, though most folks call me Sam." "Sam," she repeated, testing the name. It suited him, straightforward and unpretentious. As night fell fully, the temperature dropped, and Olivia found herself shivering despite the fire. Without comment, Sam removed his duster and handed it to her. "What about you?" she protested. "I'm used to the cold," he assured her. "Blacksmith's forge keeps me plenty warm most days. I reckon I've stored up enough heat to last through one chilly night." Olivia accepted the coat gratefully, wrapping it around her shoulders. It smelled faintly of smoke and leather, and something uniquely Sam, a clean, masculine scent that she found oddly comforting. "You should get some sleep," he said, adding another log to the fire. "We've got a long ride ahead of us tomorrow. What about you?" "I'll keep watch for a while," he replied, "just to be safe." Olivia nodded, suddenly aware of how exhausted she truly was. The emotional and physical toll of the day had left her drained. She settled on a bed of pine needles near the fire, using Sam's rolled-up blanket as a pillow despite his protests that she should take it. "Good night, Sam," she murmured, her eyelids already growing heavy. "And thank you for everything." The last thing she saw before sleep claimed her was Sam's face in the firelight, his expression soft as he nodded in acknowledgement. Olivia woke to the smell of coffee and the soft sounds of morning in the wilderness birdsong, the rustle of wind through pine needles, the quiet nickering of Rusty as he grazed nearby. For a moment she was disoriented, expecting to find herself in her bedroom at home. Then the events of the previous day came rushing back, and she sat up with a gasp. Sam was already awake, tending to a small fire over which a battered coffee pot was suspended. He looked up at her movement, offering a tentative smile. "Morning, sleep well." Olivia stretched, surprised to find that, despite her improvised bedding, she had indeed slept soundly. "Better than I expected," she admitted, running a hand through her short hair, still startled by the feel of it ending so abruptly at her chin. "Coffee," Sam offered, holding out a tin cup. She accepted it gratefully, wrapping her hands around the warm metal. The coffee was strong and bitter, nothing like the carefully brewed beverage served at her parents' table, but it was exactly what she needed to clear the fog of sleep from her mind. "We should reach the cabin by midday," Sam told her, packing up their meager camp, "if we keep a good pace." Olivia nodded, finishing her coffee and rising to help. As they prepared to depart, she caught Sam watching her with an unreadable expression. "What is it?" she asked. He seemed embarrassed to be caught staring. "Nothing, it's just you're handling all this remarkably well. Most ladies of your background would be falling to pieces about now." "Perhaps I'm not most ladies," Olivia replied, surprised by her own boldness. A slow smile spread across Sam's face. "No, I reckon you're not." They set off shortly after, with Olivia once again seated behind Sam on Rusty's broad back. The terrain grew steadily more challenging as they climbed higher into the foothills, following game trails and narrow paths that seemed barely passable. Sam navigated confidently, occasionally pointing out landmarks or interesting sights, a hawk circling overhead, a family of deer watching them warily from a thicket, wildflowers carpeting a small meadow in brilliant color. "It's beautiful up here," Olivia remarked, taking in the sweeping vistas of the Wyoming wilderness. From their elevated position, she could see for miles the rolling plains stretching toward the horizon, with Linden now just a distant cluster of buildings far below. "That it is," Sam agreed. "My pa used to say God made the mountains to remind us how small we really are. Your father sounds like a wise man." "He was." Sam's voice held a note of sadness. "Died in '67, not long after I came back from the war. Fever took him. That's when I took over the smithy." "You fought in the war?" Olivia asked, surprised. She would have put Sam's age at around 26 or 27, making him just a boy when the conflict began. "Enlisted in '63 when I was 18, he confirmed. "Served with the Union cavalry until Appomattox. Came home with this to remember it by." He shifted slightly, and for the first time Olivia noticed the slight stiffness in his left shoulder when he moved. "Were you badly hurt? Minier ball caught me at Petersburg. Missed anything vital, but I still feel it when the weather turns." He said it matter-of-factly, without self-pity. "I was luckier than most." Olivia fell silent, thinking about how little she knew of the man who was risking so much to help her. While she had been safely ensconced in her father's house, attending finishing school and learning the social graces that would make her a suitable wife for a man like Harold Whitaker, Sam Morgan had been fighting for his life on distant battlefields. Around midday, just as Sam had predicted, they crested a ridge and the cabin came into view. It was small but sturdy-looking, built of solid logs with a stone chimney at one end and a covered porch across the front. A small stream gurgled nearby, and a rudimentary corral stood ready for Rusty. "It's not much," Sam said, sounding almost apologetic as he helped Olivia dismount. "But it's solid and warm, and no one's likely to come looking for you up here." "It's perfect," Olivia replied sincerely, stretching her sore muscles as Sam led Rusty to the corral. The interior of the cabin was simple but clean, consisting of one main room with a fireplace, a rough-hewn table with 2 chairs, a small kitchenette area with shelves of supplies, and 2 narrow beds against opposite walls. A colorful quilt brightened each bed, and curtains made from faded gingham hung at the single window. It was a far cry from the luxury Olivia was accustomed to, but there was something immediately welcoming about the snug space. "My sister Abigail made those quilts," Sam explained, noticing her examining them. "She comes up here sometimes when she needs to get away from her husband and 6 children," he smiled fondly. "Says this is the only place she can hear herself think. 6 children." Olivia couldn't hide her surprise. Sam chuckled. "Abby always wanted a big family. She and Thomas have been blessed that way." He moved to the fireplace, kneeling to arrange kindling for a fire. "She'll be worried when she hears what I've done helping you like this, but she'll understand." Will she? Olivia asked softly. Most people would say you've done something terrible aiding a woman in breaking her promise, causing a scandal. Sam struck a match, watching as the flame caught and spread to the kindling before answering. Abby knows what it's like to fear the man you're supposed to trust above all others. His voice was low, almost as if he were speaking to himself. Our father wasn't always kind to our mother, especially when he drank. Olivia remained silent, sensing this was difficult for him to share. She stayed with him until the day she died, Sam continued, his attention fixed on the growing fire. Too afraid to leave, too bound by what the church and society told her was her duty. He finally looked up at Olivia, his blue eyes intense. I swore I'd never stand by and watch another woman trapped in that kind of situation, not if I could help it. The weight of his words hung between them, and Olivia felt something shift in her understanding of this man. His decision to help her hadn't been impulsive or reckless, it had been deeply personal, rooted in his own painful history. Thank you for telling me that, she said quietly, and for bringing me here. Sam nodded, rising to his feet. You're safe now, that's what matters. He moved to the shelves, taking inventory of the supplies. We've got enough food for a couple of weeks. Flour, beans, salt pork, coffee, some preserves Abby put up last summer. There's a rifle over the door if you need it, though I doubt you will. Not many visitors up this way. How long will you stay? Olivia asked, suddenly anxious at the thought of being left completely alone. Sam paused in his inventory. I should get back to Linden soon to make sure no one connects your disappearance with me. If I'm gone too long, people might start asking questions. Seeing her expression, he added gently, but I don't have to leave right away. I can stay a few days, help you get settled. Relief flooded through her. The thought of navigating this new reality alone was overwhelming. I'd appreciate that, she admitted. I'm afraid I don't know the first thing about surviving in a place like this. You'll learn quick enough, Sam assured her with a smile. You strike me as a woman who can adapt to just about anything. His confidence in her was touching and unfamiliar. Harold had always emphasized her deficiencies, too outspoken, too independent in her thinking, too unpolished despite her finishing school education. Even her parents had focused on molding her into the perfect society wife rather than encouraging her natural abilities. I hope you're right, she said, returning his smile hesitantly, because I have a feeling there's no going back now. Over the next few days, Sam taught Olivia the basics of cabin life, how to maintain the fire, cook simple meals on the cast iron stove, fetch water from the stream, and identify which local plants were edible and which were to be avoided. She was a quick study, eager to learn and determined to master these unfamiliar skills. They fell into an easy rhythm, with Sam handling the heavier tasks like chopping wood and hunting for fresh meat, while Olivia took charge of cooking and organizing their limited supplies. In the evenings, they sat by the fire, talking long into the night. Olivia told him about her life in Linden, her brief time at finishing school in Denver, and how her father's financial troubles had led to her engagement to Harold Whitaker. Sam shared stories of his time in the war, his work as a blacksmith, and his dreams of someday having a larger forge where he could create more artistic pieces rather than just practical ironwork. You should see some of the things I've designed, he said on their third evening, sketching in the margins of an old newspaper with a stub of charcoal. Decorative gates, railings with scrollwork, even some furniture pieces with iron details. Olivia leaned closer to see his drawings, impressed by the intricate designs. These are beautiful, Sam. Why haven't you made them? He shrugged, a hint of self-consciousness in the gesture. No market for such things in Linden. Folks there want practical items, horseshoes, wagon wheels, basic tools. Anything fancy has to be ordered from back east. Perhaps you're in the wrong town, Olivia suggested. In a larger city, people might appreciate your artistry more. Maybe someday, Sam said, though he didn't sound convinced. For now, the smithy in Linden is all I've got. Olivia studied him in the firelight, noting the wistful expression on his face. You've put your own dreams aside to help me, she realized aloud, if Harold discovers your involvement. He won't, Sam assured her. And even if he did, it was my choice to help you. I don't regret it." Their eyes met across the table, and something unspoken passed between them, a connection that had been growing stronger with each passing day. Olivia was the first to look away, suddenly aware of the impropriety of their situation. Here she was, alone in a remote cabin with a man who was neither her husband nor a relative. If anyone from Linden knew, her reputation would be beyond salvaging. "What will happen when you go back?" she asked, changing the subject. "Won't people wonder where you've been?" "I'll say I went to visit Abby in Cheyenne," Sam replied. "No one will question it. I make the trip every few months. And what about me? How long can I stay here?" Sam's expression grew serious. "That depends on how long Whitaker keeps looking for you. A man like that doesn't take humiliation well." He hesitated before continuing. "There's talk of extending the railroad through to Montana. Construction camps are always looking for cooks and laundresses. Once things die down, you might find work there under a new name." "A laundress," Olivia echoed, trying to imagine herself scrubbing clothes for rough railroad workers. It was a far cry from the future she'd been raised to expect, yet the idea didn't repel her as it once might have. "I suppose I could learn. You wouldn't have to do it forever," Sam said quickly. "Just until you can save enough to go somewhere else, Denver, maybe, or San Francisco, big cities where no one would know you." The thought of such complete anonymity was both frightening and exhilarating. "A fresh start," Olivia mused. "No one's expectations to live up to but my own." "Exactly." Sam's eyes were warm with approval. "You could be anyone you want to be." That night, lying in her narrow bed across the room from where Sam slept, Olivia contemplated the strange turn her life had taken. A week ago, she had been preparing to become Mrs. Harold Whitaker, mistress of one of the finest homes in the territory. Now she was hiding in a mountain cabin, contemplating a future as a laundress under an assumed name. Yet strangely, she felt more at peace than she had in months. She turned her head to look at Sam's sleeping form, his face relaxed and boyish in slumber. He had risked everything to help a woman he barely knew, asking nothing in return. Men like him were rare in Olivia's experience. Harold had always expected something for his generosity: compliance, gratitude, subservience. Her father had viewed her primarily as an asset to be leveraged for financial gain. Even the gentleman who had courted her before Harold had seemed more interested in her family's social standing than in Olivia herself. But Sam was different. His kindness came without conditions or expectations. And over these past days, as they had talked and worked side by side, Olivia had begun to feel something stirring within her, an awareness of him not just as her rescuer, but as a man. A handsome, honorable man whose quiet strength and gentle humor had begun to capture her heart. The realization should have alarmed her. She had just fled one potential marriage. The last thing she should be doing was developing feelings for another man. Yet she couldn't deny the warmth that spread through her whenever Sam smiled at her, or the way her pulse quickened when their hands accidentally touched. "Foolish," she whispered to herself, turning away from the sight of him. "Focus on surviving, Olivia. There's no room for romantic notions now." But even as she closed her eyes, willing sleep to come, she couldn't banish the image of Sam's face from her mind. The next morning dawned clear and crisp, the mountain air fragrant with pine and wildflowers. Olivia woke to find Sam already gone, his bed neatly made. A note on the table informed her that he'd gone hunting and would return by midday. Alone in the cabin, Olivia set about her morning tasks with the newfound competence she'd developed over the past days. She built up the fire, put coffee on to boil, and mixed biscuit dough for their breakfast. As she worked, she found herself humming softly, a habit she'd abandoned during her engagement to Harold, who found it irritating. After breakfast, she decided to explore the area around the cabin more thoroughly. Sam had shown her the basics: where to gather firewood, where the best water from the stream could be found, which berry bushes were safe to harvest from, but she hadn't ventured far on her own. The day was perfect for exploration, warm sunshine tempering the mountain chill. Olivia followed the stream a short distance. delighting in the clear water rushing over smooth stones and the occasional flash of tiny fish darting in the deeper pools. She gathered wild strawberries, their sweetness exploding on her tongue as she sampled a few, and collected some of the wildflowers that carpeted a sunny meadow. So absorbed was she in her discoveries that she almost missed the sound at first, the distant rhythm of hoofbeats approaching the cabin. For a moment she thought it must be Sam returning early, but something made her hesitate. Sam would have called out to her by now, knowing she might be startled by his sudden appearance. Heart racing, Olivia crouched behind a large boulder, peering cautiously toward the cabin. Two riders were approaching strangers, not Sam. With a surge of terror, she recognized one of them as Jeb Taylor, one of Harold Whitaker's ranch hands. Had they tracked her here? How was that possible? Sam had been so careful to cover their trail. The men dismounted, tying their horses to the porch railing. One of them, not Jeb, but a man Olivia didn't recognize, drew his gun before approaching the cabin door. "Hello, the house," he called out. "Anybody home?" Silence answered him. Olivia remained frozen in her hiding place, scarcely daring to breathe. "Place looks occupied," Jeb observed, gesturing to the thin wisp of smoke still rising from the chimney. "Fire's recent. Morgan's horse is gone," the other man noted, peering into the corral, "but somebody's here." All the signs point to it. They knew about Sam. Somehow they had connected him to her disappearance. Panic threatened to overwhelm Olivia, but she forced herself to stay calm. She needed to warn Sam before he returned, unaware of the danger. The men entered the cabin, and Olivia used their momentary absence to edge away from her hiding place, moving deeper into the forest that surrounded the clearing. She needed to circle around to position herself where she might spot Sam returning before the men inside did. As she moved carefully through the underbrush, trying to make as little noise as possible, she heard the men emerge from the cabin. "Someone's definitely staying here," Jeb was saying. "Women's things inside, gotta be the Greenwood girl." "Whitaker was right about Morgan helping her," the other man replied. "He'll pay good money when we bring her back." "And what about Morgan? Boss didn't say anything about him." There was a pause before the second man answered, his voice cold. "If he gets in our way, we deal with him. Whitaker won't shed any tears over a blacksmith." The casual menace in the man's tone sent a chill through Olivia's body. This wasn't just about bringing her back anymore. Sam was in danger because of her. She continued her careful circuit of the clearing, finally positioning herself where she could watch the trail leading to the cabin. The men had returned inside, presumably to wait in ambush for Sam's return. Time stretched endlessly as Olivia maintained her vigil, muscles cramping from remaining still for so long. The sun had passed its zenith when she finally spotted him, Sam, leading Rusty up the trail with a brace of rabbits slung over his saddle. Gathering her courage, Olivia stepped out onto the path, waving her arms to catch his attention while staying far enough from the cabin that the men inside wouldn't spot her. Sam reined in sharply at the sight of her, his expression immediately alert. He approached cautiously, leading Rusty by the reins. "What's wrong?" he asked, his voice low. "Whitaker's men," Olivia whispered urgently. "Two of them, they're waiting for you in the cabin." Sam's face hardened. "Are you sure they're Whitakers?" "I recognized one of them, Jeb Taylor." "They know you helped me, Sam, they said." She swallowed hard. "They said they'd deal with you if you got in their way." To her surprise, Sam's expression showed more resignation than fear. "I figured something like this might happen," he said grimly. "Whitaker's not the kind of man to let things go." "What are we going to do?" Olivia asked, her voice trembling despite her efforts to stay calm. Sam was silent for a moment, his eyes scanning their surroundings. "First, we need to get you somewhere safe," he finally said. "There's an old miner's dugout about a mile from here, hidden in the hillside. Most folks don't even know it exists." "And then what? We can't go back to Linden." "No, we can't," Sam agreed. "Once they know for certain I helped you, nowhere in Wyoming territory will be safe for either of us." He took a deep breath, seeming to come to a decision. "I have some money saved, not much, but enough to get us to Colorado, maybe. Denver's a big city. We could lose ourselves there." "Us," Olivia repeated, caught by the words. Sam met her gaze directly. I'm not letting you face this alone, Olivia. Not unless, he hesitated. Not unless you'd rather I didn't come with you. In that moment, with danger so close and their future so uncertain, Olivia acknowledged what she had been trying to deny for days. I want you with me, she said simply. I can't imagine doing this without you. Relief softened his features. Then we'll go together. He handed Rusty's reins to her. Take him and go north along the stream for about a mile. You'll see a stand of 3 large pine trees on a rise to your right. The dugout is just beyond them, built into the hillside. Wait for me there. What about you? Olivia asked, suddenly afraid. I need to get some things from the cabin supplies, my savings, and I can't leave those men free to track us. They're armed, Sam. A grim smile touched his lips. So am I. He reached into his saddlebag, pulling out a well-worn Colt revolver. I was a cavalry scout, remember? I know how to handle myself. Olivia wanted to protest further, but the determined set of his jaw told her it would be useless. Be careful, she urged instead. Always am. He touched her cheek briefly, the gesture tender despite its brevity. Go now. I'll find you. With a heavy heart, Olivia led Rusty away as instructed, looking back only once to see Sam slipping into the forest, circling around to approach the cabin from an unexpected direction. The dugout was exactly where Sam had described it, a crude shelter built half into the hillside, its entrance nearly hidden by overgrown vegetation. Inside, it was dark and musty but dry, with a dirt floor and rough wooden walls reinforced with stones. It had clearly been abandoned for some time, but it would serve as a temporary hiding place. Olivia secured Rusty nearby, making sure he had access to grass and the small stream that trickled down the hillside. Then she settled in to wait, every sense alert for sounds of approach, friend or foe. The minutes stretched into hours, the late afternoon sun casting longer and longer shadows through the trees. Anxiety gnawed at her as the silence continued unbroken. What if Sam had been captured, or worse? Just as she was contemplating returning to the cabin to look for him, she heard footsteps approaching. Olivia pressed herself against the back wall of the dugout, Sam's hunting knife clutched in her trembling hand, the only weapon she had. Olivia. Sam's voice, low and cautious, reached her before she could see him. It's me. She nearly collapsed with relief as he ducked into the small shelter. His face was smudged with dirt and there was a tear in his sleeve, but he appeared otherwise unharmed. What happened? She asked, setting aside the knife. I was so worried. Sam lowered himself to the ground beside her with a weary sigh. They're gone. Persuaded them it would be in their best interest to return to Linden empty-handed. You fought them. Olivia asked, noticing now the bruise forming along his jawline. Let's just say we came to an understanding, Sam replied, his tone making it clear he didn't want to elaborate. Jeb Taylor's always been a reasonable man, despite working for Whitaker. Once I made it clear how things stood, he was willing to listen to reason. Olivia suspected there was more to the story than Sam was telling her, but she didn't press. So what happens now? Now we rest, Sam said, pulling a bundle from inside his jacket. I got what we need from the cabin money, some food, a few personal items. He gave her a tired smile. We'll leave at first light, head southwest. There's a small settlement called Fairview about 2 days' ride from here. We can catch the stage there to Laramie, then the train east to Denver. Will we be safe in Denver? Olivia asked, trying to envision this new future they were planning. Safer than here, Sam replied honestly. It's a growing city, lots of new people arriving every day. 2 more won't draw much attention. He hesitated before adding, I have a friend there, served with him during the war. He's got a forge of his own now, might be willing to take me on. And me? Olivia asked softly. What will I do in Denver? Sam's expression gentled. Whatever you want to do, Olivia. That's the beauty of starting over, you get to decide who you want to be. The sincerity in his voice moved her deeply. No one had ever offered her such freedom before, such respect for her own choices. On impulse, she reached out to touch the bruise on his jaw, her fingers gentle against his skin. Thank you, she whispered, for everything. Sam caught her hand in his, holding it against his face for a moment before slowly lowering it, though he didn't release her fingers. You don't need to thank me, he said, his voice rough with emotion. I'd do it all again in a heartbeat. Something shifted between them in that moment. A boundary crossed, an understanding reached without words. Olivia felt it in the quickening of her pulse, saw it reflected in the warmth of Sam's blue eyes. "We should try to get some sleep," he said after a long moment, reluctantly releasing her hand. "Tomorrow will be a long day." They made what comfort they could in the small dugout, sharing Sam's bedroll and the few blankets he had brought from the cabin. Despite the hard ground and their uncertain circumstances, Olivia found herself drifting off, lulled by the steady rhythm of Sam's breathing beside her and the knowledge that, for now at least, they were safe. Dawn broke clear and cool, the forest coming alive with birdsong around them. They ate a quick breakfast of jerky and hard biscuits, then prepared to depart. Sam had managed to salvage most of their supplies from the cabin, packing them efficiently onto Rusty. "We'll have to take turns riding," he explained as he finished securing their belongings. "Rusty's strong, but carrying double for too long will wear him out, especially in this terrain." Olivia nodded her understanding. "I'm happy to walk. After all those hours at finishing school learning to sit properly and pour tea correctly, it feels good to use my body for something practical." Sam chuckled, the sound warming her more than the early morning sun. "Somehow I can't picture you as a proper society lady even before all this." "No," Olivia raised an eyebrow, amused. "And why is that, Mr. Morgan? You've got too much spirit," he replied simply. "Too much fire in your eyes." The casual compliment brought a flush to Olivia's cheeks. Before she could respond, Sam had turned away to make a final check of their supplies, but the words lingered in her mind as they set off, heading southwest as planned. The journey was arduous, their path taking them through rugged terrain where they often had to dismount and lead Rusty carefully over difficult passages. They spoke little, conserving their energy for the journey, but there was a comfort in their shared silence, a growing ease between them that needed no words. By late afternoon, they had covered less ground than Sam had hoped, and dark clouds were gathering on the horizon. "Storm coming," he observed, eyeing the sky with concern. "We should look for shelter soon." "How far are we from Fairview?" Olivia asked, trying to mask her fatigue. Her feet were blistered from the unfamiliar boots, and every muscle ached from the unaccustomed exertion. "Still a good day's journey," Sam admitted. "But I know these mountains. There's an old line shack used by cattle outfits during summer grazing about an hour ahead. Not much, but it'll keep us dry." They pushed on, the wind rising around them as the storm approached. By the time the crude shelter came into view, the first heavy raindrops were beginning to fall. They hurried inside just as the heavens opened, rain lashing against the small cabin's single window. The line shack was even more basic than the hunting cabin, just one room with a small stove, a rough-hewn table, and a single narrow cot. But it was dry and would shelter them from the storm that now raged outside. Sam busied himself with starting a fire in the stove, while Olivia unpacked the food they would need for their evening meal. As she moved around the tiny space, she was acutely aware of Sam's presence, the breadth of his shoulders as he bent over the stove, the way his hair curled slightly at the nape of his neck, the strength in his hands as he arranged the kindling. These past days together had changed something fundamental between them. The desperate circumstances of their flight had forged a bond that went beyond mere friendship or gratitude. Olivia could no longer deny the feelings growing within her, feelings that both excited and frightened her with their intensity. "Penny, for your thoughts," Sam's voice broke into her reverie. He had straightened up, the fire now crackling cheerfully in the stove, and was regarding her with a curious expression. Olivia busied herself with slicing salt pork for their supper. "I was just thinking about how much has changed," she said truthfully. "A week ago, I was about to become Mrs. Harold Whitaker, and now you're on the run with a blacksmith," Sam finished for her, a wry smile playing at his lips. "Not exactly the future you were raised to expect." "No," Olivia agreed, returning his smile, "but perhaps a better one in some ways." Sam's expression grew serious. "You don't regret it, running away?" "Not for a moment," she replied without hesitation. I was marrying Harold because it was expected of me, because it would save my family from financial ruin, not because I loved him. She set down the knife, meeting Sam's gaze directly. I think I always knew, deep down, that something was wrong with him. The way his temper would flare over the smallest things, how he spoke to those he considered beneath him, but I convinced myself it would be different once we were married. It wouldn't have been, Sam said quietly. Men like Whitaker don't change. I know that now. Olivia moved closer to where he stood. Sam, I need to thank you properly, not just for helping me escape, but for showing me that I had a choice, that I could shape my own destiny. Sam shook his head, looking almost embarrassed. You always had that strength in you, Olivia. I just helped you see it. Nevertheless, I'm grateful. She laid a hand on his arm, feeling the solid warmth of him through his sleeve. More than I can express. Their eyes met and held, the moment stretching between them with unspoken possibilities. Sam's gaze dropped to her lips, and for a breathless instant, Olivia thought he might kiss her. But then he stepped back, breaking the connection. We should eat, he said, his voice rougher than usual. Get some rest. Tomorrow will be another long day. Dinner was a quiet affair, both of them lost in their own thoughts as the storm continued to rage outside. When it came time to sleep, Sam insisted Olivia take the narrow cot while he made do with his bedroll on the floor. I've slept on worse during the war, he assured her when she protested. You take the bed. Exhausted from the day's journey, Olivia didn't argue further. She removed her boots and outer clothing, keeping on her chemise and Sam's sister's dress for modesty, and settled onto the thin mattress. Across the room, she could hear Sam arranging his makeshift bed on the floor. Sleep, however, proved elusive despite her fatigue. She lay awake, listening to the rain pounding on the roof and the occasional rumble of thunder. Her thoughts kept returning to that moment of connection with Sam, the look in his eyes that had stirred something deep within her. Sam. She whispered into the darkness, unsure if he was still awake. His response was immediate, suggesting he too had been lying awake. What will happen when we reach Denver? There was a long pause before he answered. We'll find somewhere to stay, separate rooms at a boarding house, perhaps. I'll look for work at the forges. You can decide what you want to do next. And us? Olivia asked, her heart beating faster at her own boldness. What will happen with us? The silence that followed seemed endless. Finally, she heard him shift, the rustle of his bedroll suggesting he had turned to face her direction, though in the darkness she could barely make out his outline. What do you want to happen, Olivia? His voice was low, careful, as if he feared her answer. Gathering her courage, Olivia sat up on the edge of the cot. I want to be with you, she said simply, not just as someone you've rescued, but as more. She heard his sharp intake of breath. You don't know what you're saying, he responded, his voice strained. You've been through a traumatic experience. It's natural to feel attached to the person who helped you. That's not what this is, Olivia insisted, rising from the cot and moving toward the sound of his voice. She knelt beside his bedroll, reaching out until her hand found his shoulder. I know my own heart, Sam. These feelings aren't born of gratitude or confusion. They're real. In the dim light from the banked fire in the stove, she could just make out his features, his expression a mixture of hope and uncertainty. Olivia, I'm not the kind of man someone like you ends up with. I'm just a blacksmith with little to my name. I can't offer you the life you're accustomed to. I don't want that life, she said fiercely. I never did. It was chosen for me, not by me. She moved her hand to his face, tracing the strong line of his jaw. I choose you, Sam Morgan. If you'll have me. For a long moment, he remained motionless, and Olivia feared she had misread everything between them. Then his hand came up to cover hers where it rested against his cheek, and he turned his face to press a kiss into her palm. I've been fighting these feelings since the moment you ran from that church, he admitted, his voice rough with emotion. Telling myself it wasn't right, that you deserved better than a life on the run with me. There is no better, Olivia whispered, leaning closer to him in the darkness. Not for me. When their lips finally met, it was with a tenderness that belied the intensity of emotion behind it. Sam's arms came around her, drawing her closer as the kiss deepened, becoming something more urgent, more hungry. Olivia responded in kind, pouring all the feelings she had been struggling to contain into this connection between them. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Sam rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he said simply. "I think I've loved you since I saw you running from that church, looking so fierce and determined even in your fear." "I love you too," Olivia replied, the words feeling both momentous and completely natural. "I didn't know it was possible to feel this way, so certain, so complete." Sam brushed a strand of her short hair back from her face. "We'll face challenges," he warned. "Whitaker isn't likely to give up easily, and even in Denver we'll need to be careful." "I'm not afraid," Olivia assured him, "not when we're together." They spent the rest of the night talking and planning, sharing kisses and gentle touches as the storm gradually subsided outside. By the time dawn broke, clear and bright after the night's tempest, they had made their decision. "We'll get married in Denver," Sam said as they prepared to continue their journey, "as soon as we're settled, if you're certain that's what you want." Olivia's answer was a kiss that left no doubt about her certainty. The remainder of their journey to Fairview passed without incident, though they remained vigilant, aware that Harold Whitaker's influence extended far beyond Linden. The small settlement, when they reached it late the following day, proved to be little more than a cluster of buildings around a stage depot, but it represented the first step on their new path together. "The stage to Laramie leaves tomorrow morning," Sam told Olivia after speaking with the depot manager. "From there, we can catch the Union Pacific to Denver." They secured a room at Fairview's only hotel, a respectable establishment where the proprietor assumed they were already married, and didn't question when Sam introduced Olivia as Mrs. Morgan. The pretense made Olivia blush, but also filled her with a warm anticipation of the day when it would be true. The stage journey to Laramie was long and uncomfortable, the coach packed with other travelers and the roads rough. But Olivia found she didn't mind the discomfort, not with Sam beside her, his presence a constant reassurance. In Laramie, they boarded the eastbound train, securing a small private compartment where they could speak freely without fear of being overheard. As the locomotive pulled away from the station, steam billowing past their window, Olivia felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. "We've done it," she said, watching the Wyoming landscape begin to roll past. "We're really getting away." Sam squeezed her hand where it rested on the seat between them. "A new beginning," he agreed. The train journey took them through dramatic scenery, towering mountains giving way to rolling foothills, and eventually the sprawling plains that surrounded Denver. When they finally arrived in the city, Olivia was struck by its size and bustle compared to the small towns she was accustomed to. "It's overwhelming," she admitted as they made their way through the crowded streets, seeking the address of Sam's wartime friend. "We'll find our place here," Sam assured her, his arm protective around her shoulders. Robert Wilson, Sam's former comrade, welcomed them warmly to his modest home near the city's growing industrial district. His wife, Ellen, took to Olivia immediately, clucking sympathetically when Sam explained a simplified version of their situation. "Of course you must stay with us until you get settled," Ellen insisted, showing them to a small but comfortable guest room. "And Robert's been saying for months he needs help at the forge. Business is booming with all the new construction in the city." Within days, a pattern began to establish itself. Sam worked alongside Robert at the forge, his skill as a blacksmith quickly proving valuable as they took on more elaborate commissions. Olivia, determined to contribute, found work at a small millinery shop owned by a friend of Ellen's, her finishing school training in needlework finally serving a practical purpose. In the evenings, they would walk through Denver's streets, planning their future together. Sam was saving every penny he earned, determined to have enough to open his own forge eventually, specializing in the decorative ironwork he loved to create. "I've been thinking," he said one evening as they strolled along a tree-lined avenue. "What if we didn't settle in Denver permanently?" Olivia looked at him curiously. "Where were you thinking instead? San Francisco, perhaps, or even Chicago?" His eyes lit up with possibilities. Somewhere with a real appreciation for craftsmanship, where I could build something truly worthwhile. I'd follow you anywhere, Olivia said simply. As long as we're together. 1 month after their arrival in Denver, they were married in a small ceremony at the local courthouse, with Robert and Ellen as their witnesses. Olivia wore a simple blue dress she had made herself with Ellen's help. Sam had saved enough to buy her a slender gold band, which he slipped onto her finger with hands that trembled slightly from emotion. I, Samuel James Morgan, take thee, Olivia Grace Greenwood, to be my lawfully wedded wife, he vowed, his voice steady and sure. To have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part. As Olivia repeated her own vows, she marveled at the journey that had brought her to this moment. The woman who had fled in terror from her wedding to Harold Whitaker seemed like a different person, entirely someone constrained by expectations and fear. That woman could never have imagined finding true love with a blacksmith, starting a new life in a city far from home, embracing a future built on her own choices rather than others' demands. "You may kiss the bride," the judge announced, and Sam's lips found hers in a kiss that sealed their commitment. "Mrs. Morgan," he whispered as they parted, his blue eyes bright with joy. "I love the sound of that," Olivia replied, her heart so full she thought it might burst. Their life together in Denver flourished beyond their expectations. Sam's skill as an artisan blacksmith began to attract attention, particularly his ornate railings and gates that adorned some of the city's finest new homes. Olivia discovered a talent for business, keeping the books for Sam's growing enterprise and eventually opening a small shop adjacent to his forge where she sold not only his decorative ironwork, but also her own handcrafted items. They had been married just over a year when news reached them from Linden. Ellen's cousin, who worked as a teacher there, wrote with gossip from their former home. Harold Whitaker married Isabel Foster from Cheyenne, Ellen told them over dinner one evening. Apparently it was quite the society wedding. My cousin says he's still bitter about you, Olivia, but seems to have moved on. Olivia felt a twinge of sympathy for Isabel Foster, whoever she was, but mostly she felt relief. Perhaps now they could truly put the past behind them. That night, as she lay in Sam's arms in the small but comfortable home they had purchased on the outskirts of Denver, Olivia shared news of her own. "I went to see Dr. Bennett today," she said, her hand finding Sam's in the darkness. "He confirmed what I've suspected for a few weeks now." Sam propped himself up on one elbow, looking down at her face in the moonlight that filtered through their bedroom window. "Olivia, we're going to have a baby," she told him, joy bubbling up inside her. "Next spring." The wonder that spread across Sam's face was something Olivia knew she would remember for the rest of her life. He gathered her close, his hands gentle as they cradled her still flat stomach. "A baby," he repeated, voice thick with emotion. "Our baby." In that moment, Olivia felt the final pieces of her new life falling into place. From a desperate escape on her wedding day to this moment of pure happiness, it was a journey she would never have chosen for herself, yet one she would never regret taking. "I love you, Sam Morgan," she whispered, pulling him down for a kiss. "More than I ever thought it was possible to love anyone. And I love you, Olivia Morgan," he replied, his smile visible even in the dimness. "My brave, beautiful wife." Their son, James Robert Morgan, was born on a bright April morning in 1875, his lusty cries announcing his arrival to the world. He had Sam's blue eyes and Olivia's determined chin, a perfect blend of his parents. As Olivia cradled him in her arms, Sam seated beside her on the bed, his arm protectively around both of them. She couldn't help but think of the chain of events that had led to this moment. One act of courage running from a church in her wedding finery, choosing an uncertain future over a life she feared had changed everything. "He's perfect," Sam murmured, one finger gently tracing their son's tiny features, just like his mother. Olivia leaned into her husband's embrace, overwhelmed with gratitude for the life they had built together. "Just think," she said softly, None of this would have happened if I hadn't seen the rage in Harold's eyes that day. You were braver than you knew, Sam replied, pressing a kiss to her temple. And I thank God every day that I was there to help you disappear. 3 years later, their family grew again with the arrival of a daughter, Sarah Ellen Morgan, who had her mother's golden hair and her father's gentle spirit. By then, Sam's reputation as a master craftsman had spread throughout Colorado and beyond, his distinctive ironwork commissioned for buildings as far away as San Francisco. On the 5th anniversary of their wedding, Sam surprised Olivia with a gift, the deed to a property in San Francisco, where he planned to establish a new forge and studio. Are you sure about this? Olivia asked, studying the documents with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. Denver has been good to us. It has, Sam agreed, taking her hands in his. But San Francisco offers opportunities I can only dream of here, and haven't we always talked about living near the ocean? Think of the children growing up with those views, that fresh sea air. The move to San Francisco in the autumn of 1879 marked the beginning of what would prove to be the most prosperous and creatively fulfilling period of their lives. Sam's artistic ironwork found an eager market among the city's wealthy residents, who were building elaborate homes and businesses in the aftermath of the gold rush. Olivia expanded her own business interests, opening a successful boutique on a fashionable street where she sold not only Sam's smaller decorative pieces, but also curated items from other artisans. Their home, perched on a hill with views of the bay, became a gathering place for artists, writers, and craftspeople, a vibrant community far removed from the structured society Olivia had once been part of in Wyoming. As their children grew, they told them the story of how their parents had met, how a young woman had fled her wedding when she saw the darkness in her intended's eyes, and how a kind-hearted blacksmith had helped her disappear. Were you scared, Mama? Young Sarah asked one evening as Olivia tucked her into bed. I was, Olivia admitted, but sometimes being brave means doing something even when you're frightened. And then you fell in love with Papa, James added from his own bed across the room, the romantic aspect of the story appealing less to his 10-year-old sensibilities than the adventure of the escape. Yes, Olivia confirmed, smiling at Sam where he stood in the doorway, watching the nighttime ritual with a tender expression. I fell in love with your Papa, and it was the best decision I ever made. Later, as they stood on their veranda watching the lights of the city twinkle beneath them, Sam wrapped his arms around Olivia from behind, pulling her back against his chest. Happy, he murmured against her hair. Olivia turned in his embrace to face him, studying the beloved features that had only grown more dear to her over the years. At 41, Sam was still handsome, a few strands of silver now threading through his dark hair, laugh lines crinkling at the corners of his eyes. She traced his face with her fingers, memorizing it anew. More than I ever dreamed possible, she replied honestly. It was true. The frightened bride who had fled her wedding in Linden, Wyoming, could never have imagined the rich, fulfilling life that awaited her. That desperate escape had not been an ending but a beginning, the first step on a journey to true love, family, and a sense of purpose that filled her days with meaning. As Sam's lips found hers in a kiss still as passionate as their first, Olivia silently thanked whatever fate or providence had given her the courage to run that day, and had placed Samuel Morgan in her path at the exact moment she needed him most. In running away from a future she feared, she had run straight into the arms of the man she was destined to love, a love that had only deepened with each passing year, a love that would sustain them for all the years to come.